Aloha. And thank you for joining us for tonight's presentation. A couple of announcements before we get forward with the show. For those of you who don't know, if you need to use the restroom is out towards your right, and the restrooms are right there for Pauline and Kanye. Just a couple of rules for Kamakakuokalani. There's no smoking in this area. If you wish to smoke, you can smoke out in the parking lot. No alcohol, of course. Uncle Joe Tasso asked us, and that's a good idea, if you have your cell phones on, please turn off your cell phones or maybe put them on silent. We have some water and tea, iced tea over there in that area in the cup, so if you wish to help yourself. Tonight's presentation is, and there's some dessert as well, some small dessert, so please help yourself. Tonight's show regarding the Army downsizing really is based on the concerns of really a singular person for tonight's presentation, and that's Manu Kaiama. She decided that it was important that we get this information out. There are a lot of people who are important in helping us get this information to you. And I'll announce some of them later on, but just so you know, this show tonight, or this presentation, is not sponsored by any organization or any person. It's just a concerned citizen. So there's no funding, so we're not beholden to anyone as well. I'm Dexter, Manu Kaiama, and I'm fortunate to serve as your host or moderator for tonight. I have the panel, and I'll introduce them to you in just a moment. But before we do, I just want to talk to you a little bit about tonight's presentation. Sorry about that, I have a little scroll. The context of tonight's presentation is somewhat important. And the context tonight is just based on the Army's plan for proposed downsizing across the United States, as well as Hawaii being selected for possible downsizing as well. And the reason I say that's the context is because there is valuable perspective in the community and valuable different perspectives, but we're not addressing it from those different perspectives, whether it's from independence model, whether we just are looking at it tonight to provide this information that the Army has already planned to downsize. And that downsizing can include Oahu. And what we have as far as our common goals, regardless of our perspective, in supporting this proposed downsizing. So just thought I'd let you know so we understand what the context of tonight's presentation is. At the table over there, the sign-up table, there are sign-up petitions if you support the Army downsizing, and I know the panel here does, and I do as well. Both paper petition that you can sign, as well as a computer, and they can have you go to the link to sign up on those petitions to support downsizing, and we would encourage everyone to sign those petitions. Another part of the goal for tonight is really to just disseminate information that you might not have been aware of about the Army's proposed downsizing. And hopefully that might encourage you to conduct your own presentations and maybe from your own perspectives, because I think it's important that we continue to have these discussions about the Army's proposed plan. What's very important to note is that January of 2015, and I believe it is January 27th, and some of the members of the panel can correct me, the Army is actually hosting, they want to hear from the community, and I think that will be held at the Halekua Hotel, and that's an opportunity for the Hawaii community to voice their opinion, to appear and voice their opinion concerning the Army downsizing. And we're hoping that, of course, it's in support of the Army downsizing. That date is important so that you have enough time perhaps to speak with your own ohana, your own family, your own organizations about supporting this endeavor. And so with that, just one more bit of information I'd like you to know about. Again, the Army is downsizing. In 2014, the Department of Defense released its quadrennial defense review called a QDR. In it, the Department of Defense releases a QDR every 4 years. It is the Army's or the military's way of articulating its strategic direction and force structured decisions for the services to implement over a fixed period of time. The Department of Defense is facing ever-increasing fiscal challenges and is unable to sustain itself at current and future levels of funding projected by the Congress. In the case of the Army, the 2014 QDR calls for a reduction of as many as 130,000 active Army duty soldiers worldwide. The Army has identified 19 bases to absorb these cuts. Bases in Hawaii being considered to meet these cuts include Schofield Barracks, 16,000 active Army, and Fort Shafter, 3,800 active Army. Again, the decision to downsize the Army has already been made. I'd like to thank former retired Colonel Al Frenzel for providing that information. He also has a website that you can go to get more information about the Army downsizing. That is www.oc4ad.com, and it can provide you with a wealth of information concerning the Army's proposed downsizing on Oahu. Again, thank you, Colonel Frenzel, for providing that information.
Just one more announcement. There is another car that's illegally parked, and you want to get out there very soon. It is a black car, license plate RYD as in dog 107. RYD as in dog 107. It's black. It's also not parked legally. Please go and move it. They're giving us a chance to move these cars. Mahalo.
Okay, now for the introduction of tonight's panel. Tonight, the first person that will be speaking tonight is Ilima. She is a member of MANA, Movement for Aloha no Ka'aina. She received her master's degree in Hawaiian Studies last year and is now a PhD student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa Political Science Indigenous Politics program. This past year, she has had the opportunity to work with Women's Voices, Women Speak, a local chapter of International Women's Network Against Militarism. Ms. Long will be covering the military footprint in the islands, data regarding the fact that they have more land percentage-wise than in any other state, and specific details of land occupation on Oahu Island. Okay, and also discuss their irresponsible behavior in caring for our Aina and our Moana. Our next speaker will be Joe Estores, affectionately known as Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe is a native Hawaiian born in Honolulu. He was an Army pilot who flew in Vietnam. He retired after 20 years in 1973. He served 5 years with the Drug Enforcement Administration in Washington, D.C., and 30 years with the Defense Department. In Europe, he was Chief of Operations for the European District of the Corps of Engineers when the Army closed down over 270 installations for the return to the government of Germany. Uncle Joe will talk about his experience as a veteran with first-hand knowledge of successful downsizing. And he will discuss both the German and U.S. states downsizing and how it will do well here on Oahu. Our next speaker is Manu Kaiama, a longtime community activist with a master's degree in business administration, accounting, and a master's degree in Hawaiian studies. Currently, she teaches accounting and Hawaiian studies courses at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She also owns and operates her own business, is a certified public accountant, and has a professional associations with the Accounting and Finance Women's Alliance, Hawaii State Federal Credit Union, the Native Hawaiian Education Council, among others. And Manu will be discussing tonight the economic possibilities for Oahu with the Army downsizing. And last but not least, sorry about that. Our last speaker will be Pauline Pilialoha Yap. Ms. Yap did her undergraduate work at Honolulu Community College and the University of Mary Hardin Baylor at Belton, Texas. double majoring in chemistry and biology. She earned a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine at Washington State University. Her kane is Norman Akahi Miyasato, and between the two of them, they have 5 children and 4 grandchildren. She has been a veterinarian for 18 years with her own business, Keola Pet Hospital, located in Mililani, and currently the military makes up over 50% of her clientele. And Pilialoha will be discussing her business and what it entails, her clientele, and how she relies on this for her livelihood, the possibility that downsizing may adversely affect her business, but her belief that having a community grown in these areas filled with people who are not subject to deployment and reassignment will be better for her business in the long run. Each of the presenters will have about 10 to 15 minutes in their presentation, and after that, I think the helpers out there, the student helpers that have these orange cards, if you wish to fill out questions and present them, they will bring the questions up, and then we will, time pending, we will read the questions and have the panel see if they can answer the questions that you've written. Okay? Thank you very much. Why don't we go ahead and start with our first presenter, Ms. Ilima.
Aloha mai kākou. Aloha. My name is Ilima Long, and I'm a student here at UH. I was asked to give an overview of the footprint of militarism on Oahu and in Hawaii, and I'm happy to do that. I only know what I know, and I only care about these issues because of the many people in this community that have been working on issues of militarism and looking at their impacts for decades, and I want to acknowledge some of that work. Some of the numbers and research that I'm going to be sharing with you folks tonight are pulled from the works of Kyle Kajihiro and the research done by Auntie Terry Kupo'olani, 2 people in our community that have been dedicating their lives to looking at the impacts of militarism on our aina. I want to acknowledge the work of DMZ, Hawaii Aloha Aina, Hawaii Peace and Justice, AFCS, and the Women's Voices, Women Speak, which is the, as Keamoku mentioned, the local chapter of the International Women's Network Against Militarism. And I know that there's lots of individuals in here that represent different organizations and themselves and their ohanas that are really committed to this issue and that have a lot of input and things to share that add a lot of richness to this. So I'm going to be giving sort of an overview of some of the impacts, looking at some numbers, bringing up some issues, but the approach that I'm taking to this tonight is for us to think about really what are some of the costs of militarism, because as this discussion and this issue gets bigger and bigger in the media and in the public, what we're going to be hearing is that this can't happen because there are just too many benefits that the military brings in, and they're going to be looking at mostly economic and job benefits. So that's going to be thrown at us, as it always is, in very powerful ways to get us to think that there's no possible way that we should support military downsizing. So I'm going to ask us to look at some of the environmental costs, some of the cultural costs, and then questions that we need to be asking ourselves about what direction we want our society to be going in at all, and what is our vision for Hawaii? Who are we and what is our place in the world? So to give just a little bit of historical context, I cannot talk about militarism in Hawaii without talking about 1893, when the USS Boston landed in Honolulu Harbor, and US Marines and Navy men came off of the ship and basically ensured the success of the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. This is also significant because with the overthrow of the kingdom, 1.8 million acres of Crown and government lands were seized, and over 50% of all militarized lands in Hawaii are those Crown and government lands. So in the archipelago, there are 161 bases. Okay, think about how small this place is in comparison to US states. 161 bases, 235,000, in fact it's over 235,000 acres of land are under military control in the Pai'aina. That's 5.7% total percent of the landmass in Hawaii. On Oahu alone, 85,700 acres are under the control of the US military. That's almost a quarter of the entire landmass of Oahu, okay, is militarized. And then just to kind of touch on the other islands as well, Hawai'i Island is home to the Pohakuloa trading area, which is 133,000 acres. That's one trading area alone for the US Army, 133,000 acres. Maui has the Air Force Optical Tracking Station on Haleakala, a sacred mountain, and Kauai has the Pacific Missile Range. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Schofield Barracks, Pearl Harbor, to get us to think about some of the costs of militarism here. And then I am going to touch a little bit on some of the other islands because they're valuable in getting us to think about cost in other ways as well. This is not necessarily the Army, but this is a great example of some of the environmental costs of militarism in Hawaii. So looking at Pearl Harbor Navy Complex is a Superfund site, meaning that it's been identified by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as a highly contaminated site. The contamination that runs the risk of impacting the health of people that live in the area. Pearl Harbor Naval Complex is 12,000 acres in area, and it has 8 streams that does feed into the harbor, including Honouliuli, Aiea, Waikele, Waiawa, Waiau, Waimalu, Ka'alauau, and Halawa. And what this means when we have these streams running from Auka to Makai into the harbor, it creates a massive estuary, right? And so estuaries are where fresh water and seawater meet, and it's just these rich places of creations of life, yeah? So they're major ecosystems develop in these estuaries, and that is why this area, Pearl Harbor, Keawalau Pu'uloa, was once the place of major fish ponds, yeah? Major intensified fish production, protein production on Oahu. So this was a major source of food for Oahu. And I want us to be thinking about that in terms of what we want and what we're going for as a community here in Hawaii for our future. But at this point, Pearl Harbor, as most of us know, is so incredibly contaminated that any food sources that are found within it, we cannot put them anywhere near our mouths. Yeah? Cannot be consumed by humans. Schofield Barracks, which is one of the sites being looked at for downsizing, along with Pearl Harbor, Schofield Barracks is also a Superfund site. Schofield Barracks is 17,725 acres. It is one of the known toxins at Schofield Barracks, as well as Makua and Pohakuloa on the Big Island, is depleted uranium. And depleted uranium is a toxic metal that affects kidney, brain, liver, heart, and reproductive functions. Depleted uranium, or DU, is used to make bullets, landmines, and missiles. And when these things explode in places where live fire training is allowed to happen, half of the depleted uranium goes into the air, and then half of it goes into the ground, and then therefore into the water. So around Schofield Barracks, approximately 55,000 people in Waihawa and Mililani obtain drinking water from public wells located within 3 miles of the base. And this is according to the US EPA's own website. So we can see that our water sources are highly impacted by the pollution caused by militarization and these military sites. It's preventing us from really capitalizing upon rich, abundant food production areas and sources. And then it's also posing a threat to our very health in terms of the depleted uranium getting into drinking water. The groundwater and the surface waters around Schofield Barracks have been identified as those are the things that are contaminated and making it a Superfund site. And Terry Keko'olani can talk more about going into Schofield Barracks and sort of the way that you have to sign your life away. You have to acknowledge that you're going into a place with depleted uranium. Okay, so it's not like this hidden fact or anything like that. Even the Army acknowledges it, and you have to sign waivers to enter into Schofield Barracks. That's something that Auntie Terry has experienced and talks about. Okay, 2 minutes left. Let's see here. Schofield Barracks. I want to move quickly to Hawai'i Island for us to think about our kuleana as people in Hawaii to the larger Pacific. Pohaku Loa, again, 133,000 acres, leased by the Department of Land and Natural Resources to the Army for $1 a year. It is a live fire training site for all branches of the military. Mauna Kea is one of the most sacred places in this whole archipelago. It's situated between, Pohaku Loa is situated between Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea, and Hualalai. This is a very sacred place. There are many sacred sites on Pohaku Loa. There are many heiaus that have been destroyed. There are many ancestral burial grounds up there. And we also know that this is a place where the U.S. does trainings with the Indonesian Army. What does that have to do with us? What does that have to do with anything? This is something that I always have to bring up. They're doing training with the Indonesian Army because the Indonesian Army is fighting a genocidal war against the indigenous people of West Papua. These are our Pacific cousins. Yeah? Why are they doing that? Because in West Papua, the U.S. has interest in what's called the Graysburg mine. It's the largest gold mine and the third largest copper mine in the world. And it's controlled by an American company named Freeport-McMoRan, who's based out of Phoenix, Arizona. So we need to think about this ethically when we're looking at militarism, right? Not just about jobs, but we need to be looking at the larger ethics of these things, how this is tied into a system that is being challenged on many levels around the world right now, that is being seen as having larger global environmental impacts and really harmful impacts on people. And lastly and quickly, militarism, as Kathy Ferguson has pointed out so well, becomes saturated in our society and everyday life in ways that we don't even see. The Pacific Missile Range facility on Kauai, not necessarily being looked at for downsizing, but when we're thinking about the impacts of militarism, partners with NASA and some other military installations for a program called STEP, Science and Technology Education Partnerships. They get 4th, 6th, and 8th graders from schools that have no funds because so much of the budget goes to militarism and not to education. And they bring them in and they teach them about science, math, and technology, hands-on in this missile range facility. And their goal is to encourage and inspire 4th, 6th, and 8th grade students to pursue careers in science, technology, and engineering and math, and as part of a comprehensive strategy to feed the pipeline of new scientists and engineers into the Navy's workforce. So these are ways, and there's many other ways, and I don't have time to talk about it, that partnerships are being created between the Army and schools that are desperate for funds to get the Army in there. Okay, so we need to even be thinking about our education system, our public education system, our Kiki's education. We need to be thinking about the environmental impacts, the impacts on our water systems, and the choice that we have for our future, to envision a future that is for Hawaii, that is abundant, that is food secure, that has clean water, restored estuaries, restored fish ponds, or one that is just status quo. And that's really the best we can do, is status quo, if we're not going to do better and move away from these impacts. Mahalo.
Aloha.
Aloha.
the only kupuna up here, I have 2 hours of presentation, and I'm going to give you all of it. I don't look at the card that says 2 minutes. I'm happy to be here tonight, and I welcome all of you to a very important event in our history. We're all living a part of history that is very important for the future generations that are coming behind us. No doubt, after over 100 years of occupation and use of the land that we have kind of gently let them use, the land is going to be contaminated in many different ways. Hazardous material, explosives, and the list goes on and on. So I think what I want to talk about tonight is we need to face the fact that when the military pulls out, we will be getting the land back, hopefully in the best condition that they could put it in. And my experiences have shown that the United States will do this, provided we prepare ourselves for that. The U.S. government has a whole set of regulations, rules, laws, CERCLA as an example, which is a comprehensive environmental response compensation, and NEPA, and all these different acronyms. They're all designed to make sure that the government prepares unused or surplus property or land so that it can be returned to the states. So at the government level, the federal government level, it's adequately covered. At the state level, there's hardly any state laws that I know of, and they are actually just following the federal processes. So, to give you an example of the result of this process, we find ourselves in our own state here with experience with Waikani, with Kaho'olawe, and with Barbers Point. Now, although the federal government has these procedures down pat, what happened in those returns that result in land that we cannot use? So we need to prepare ourselves, and I think I can give you some tips on what needs to be done because of my experiences. As chief of operations in Germany, during the time that the Army pulled out of that country after being there for over 50 years, I was able to participate in a lot of close down of military installations across the country. Basically, I was part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers team that was responsible for preparing the land and the structures to return to the German government. One example of a real shocking experience for me was we built a big hospital at an Air Force base in Rhine-Main, equivalent to the one that is over here at the west side. We built it, it was completed, we took the keys and handed it over to the German government. We never used it. So there was a lot of money soaked into that facility. But that's an example of what can happen. Another example is most of the facilities were prepared so that the German government could accept them. Our team composed of civil engineers, archaeologists, environmentalists, and geologists and everything to make sure that we cover everything to make it safe as well as livable for whoever's going to use the property after we left. On the other side of the table, receiving these properties were the equivalent to our team. So for every engineer and specialist that we had, there was a German equivalent on that side of the table. So when we signed off saying we have inspected and we have prepared this to give it back to you, they could either accept it or in many cases, they had themselves inspected the land and the buildings and the storages and all of that. And in the cases where they did not, they found that they could not accept it because it did not meet their criteria, their standards. They said, no, you take it back, you clean it up. And when it is clean according to our standards, the German standards, then we'll consider taking it back from you. Think about this. Now, in the American process, one of the entities that is built into the process is called the Local Redevelopment Authority, LRA. Example, if we're going to get back Makua, who would be, or which entity will be the LRA? Will it be Malama Makua? Will it be Waianae community? And perhaps that's what happened in Waikani and Kaho'olawe and Brothers Point. The federal government was handing off these properties back to an LRA. Well, in the German case, as I told you, there was an equivalent government-to-government level authority to say, no, United States, you go clean it up. So here's a chance for us, assuming we're going to get back these valuable properties, never to let another Kaho'olawe happen to us. We have to stand fast, build a team of experts that will be empowered with the authority to say, no, you clean it up before we even consider taking it back. A team needs a process. I think another thing the Germans did, they had their own standards. Their environmental standards were far superior to ours. So in order for us to receive these properties back in a formal way, I think it's important for us to start thinking about who that LRA is going to be for each one of these installations that we anticipate getting back. And make sure that we staff it and provide the authority to say no. And in addition, provide a list of standards so that there will be no unexploded ordnance, there will be no hazardous material, there will be no pilikia that we have to consider cleaning up ourselves like we now have to do, continuously have to do for Kaho'olawe. So, in closing, I don't know, my 2 hours just went by. Maybe it's because of my age, time just flies. I think I have given you the idea that this can happen in a Pono way. It's up to us, not the federal government, not the United States. It's up to us. I'll give you one example of some of the thoughts that I have shared with my Kupuna friends. When people talk about the Ahupua'a system from the top of the mountain to the ocean, well, I happen to come from a place called Ahua Point, no longer on a map. And I go there often because that's where I grew up. It's behind the fence. It's at Fort Kamehameha. I go back there because I go into the waters that used to be our marine garden. It was our maritime garden. And it was my playground. But when I go back to this place, it's so contaminated. And the military says, we're good stewards of your property or your resources. No, they're not. All they do is put up these signs. Contaminated fish, don't eat the fish. Don't crab here, and so forth. Is that stewards of the land or the ocean? My feeling is that when we talk about the water resources around each of the islands, especially like Hawai'i, we go out to the depths, like 200 feet. That land mass goes completely underwater, and they have to clean that area too. Because when I went to Kahului, I had to jump in the water with my bag, and I was not able to go anywhere in the water if I wanted to. There was only a certain cleared area. How bad is that picture? I did not enjoy my stay on that island because of what I experienced. After all, we had beat the Germans in the war. And when I stood there and I looked at the Germans and they looked at me and said, no, America, you take it back and clean it up. That was a hell of a blow to us. So we can do it. It's our Pilialoha. It's our wish, I hope, that the Hawaiian people will take the land back the way it should be. And that is clean, safe, and usable for the future generations. Thank you.
Actually, as a kupuna, he still had 2 more minutes, but that's okay.
Mahalo nui for such a great showing for our audience. We're really pleased and grateful that you're here, and it humbles us to be able to speak to all of you as much as we can, share information. I am not a single person who decided to do this, as Ke'omoku so generously said. There's actually a groundswell of us. There are at least 1,000 of us now, and we want thousands and thousands more of people who are starting to get educated about the possibility of having some lands returned to Hawai'i and to have the Army leave and deoccupy these areas. So this is a great opportunity for the state of Hawaii, for Hawaii's community, for Kanaka Maoli, and for our Hawaiian nationals, all of us together. It's a really great opportunity. So I kind of got involved in it because I saw it as being, just a chance of a lifetime for us to be involved, and knowing that the time is short. So I thought maybe we could try our best to get information out there that is pono, so that you can now take the information you know and talk to other family and friends, because I always run into people who come up to me now and say, oh, I never know. Oh, when did this happen? Oh, how come? And it's in the paper, it's on social media. It is out there, but as we know, it's hard to kind of get it catch on fire so that it really gets out there rapidly. And it takes work, and it takes having community forums just like this to get the word out. So mahalo for having all of us and for you coming here and taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to what we have to offer. So I actually asked 2 different economic experts to please come and speak on the economy side, and both of them unfortunately were already busy for the evening and at some period in time had to cancel. So I got stuck with this, and it's okay because I'm a business major and I have a business, and so I can speak a little bit to the economics of this adventure that we're hoping that we'll be on. So just for clarification's sake, I want to say, the Army has already made a decision. It's a done deal that they will cut 100,000 to 130,000 from their force, their personnel, before 2019, 2020. So it's going to happen. And what happened was they came out with a list, and on that list is a bunch of different areas, different cities, different base names for possible closure. So what we're doing is we're looking at that list because 2 of the bases are on Oahu and are in Hawaii. All the others are across the continental United States. So that being said, Fort Shafter is listed at military downsizing or Army downsizing, of 3,800, and then Schofield of 16,000. Okay, so when we saw that, and we know we've heard, if you remember in the past, I remember when Senator Inouye had mentioned that Pearl Harbor was on some list and we might lose Pearl Harbor. And I was thinking, yay, let's get it back, clean it up, I was like awesome. But I think he actually meant it from a standpoint that we better get our act together so the military can keep Pearl Harbor. And I think back on those days and think maybe now we're ready to get forward and move into the 21st century, which is dictating to us that we have to figure out other ways to sustain and thrive in our islands. And it doesn't mean depending on the military or even tourism. So, okay, so all these other cities, they're fighting the downsizing, right? So we suggest let Hawaii be different. Let's embrace it. Let's say, yes, us, please, okay? And so, all these other cities are gonna look at us and say, yeah, let Hawaii do it. That's what we're hoping. Okay, that's what we're hoping. To have the land returned if possible, to have it cleaned, as Uncle says, is possible, to perhaps be able to inherit the infrastructure would be fabulous, okay? The drama, of course, occurs from the brainwashing that we hear, from others who still think that we depend and need the military presence here in order to quote-unquote survive. That's a long time ago. Okay, that's a long time ago mantra that we need to educate ourselves and realize we don't need that. So moving forward, if you look at the numbers, and I want to thank Colonel Alfrenzo and the OC4AD, which I'm not a council member, but I've been working with them for putting together all the information which I'm about to use. But $14.7 billion of defense spending occurs here. Well, and so they keep talking about, you hear that in the news about this $14.7 billion, but really $1.35 billion is attributable to the Army, such a much smaller number. And according to the Honolulu Chamber of Commerce, so I question why they haven't seen the opportunity here from a business and economic perspective, but maybe they haven't quite thought it out through. But they said only 16%, so that comes down to 208 million of those dollars gets into our local economy. Okay, so it's not billions, it's 208 million. And how does it get into our local economy? Through the general excise tax. So you know that 4.5% that we pay? That's how we get that money from the military. However, we also need to look at what it costs to service the military here, to house them here. Just in comparison, one idea, DOE, Department of Education, pays over $150 million to fund the education of approximately 11,000 military dependents. How does that happen? Well, they don't pay state taxes. We do, and we support the DOE, okay? When you're on a military base, you buy goods and services from the PX. You buy your food from the commissary, right? We do not collect any state taxes. We do not collect any GE tax from that. The land that's occupied by both Fort Shafter and Schofield does not pay property taxes, okay? The largest hit Schofield, which would be, if we hope that they downsize the entire amount, of 16,000, even Hawaii News Now reported that the Army estimated, quote, there will be no significant impact on Wahiawa town if the DOD cut back soldiers. So that was an estimate from the Army. Besides these things, there's a lot to think about. There's the opportunity. Now, we do not want the Army and we do not want our congressional representatives to go in and say, how about we do half or how about we do 1/3? We want the whole bang, okay? We want the whole thing. We want the 16,000 and then the 3,800. Because if we get the entire amount, that's when we have an opportunity to get the land base back. Okay? If they take out enough personnel, they won't be able to maintain the bases at the level that they need to, so that's where we'll have an opportunity, like other bases across the continental America, other bases like in Germany, for example, we're able to give back to the people the INO, and that's what we want. So if we were to push for that, just think, okay, if we look at Fort Chapter, I don't know if any of you have been to Fort Chapter or you've ever been on base at Schofield. But there's a lot of beautiful infrastructure there. There's some housing that's just been put up. Okay, there's some construction that's happening all the time. And it's really nice. There's family housing, there's single housing. 37,779 live at Schofield Barracks and Wheelers Air Force Base. There's large industrial facilities that we could take over and be very successful over it. There's retail, wholesale facilities, there's a hospital, there's a dental clinic, there's an airfield, there's tower operations, there's fire stations for our firemen, there's education facilities, libraries, classrooms, elementary and middle schools, there's an office building, a post office, clubs, restaurants, second access road for the Leeward Coach, yay, don't we need that? Recreation facilities, and not to mention in that Wahipana, our cultural sites, which have been sorely ignored and abused. It's an opportunity for us as Kanaka to go in and to make it fun. And other things like more affordable housing. If we have this decrease in the military, we all know that their allowance for housing sets us out of the market. They are given an allowance, depending on their rank, to be able to purchase a home here. And so the prices go up because everyone selling homes here wants to sell to the military because they know they can pay more. Everybody renting here does not rent to us. They rent to military families because they know they can pay more. It's very inflationary. And so this harms us as our economy and as a community. So to have the decrease in the Army footprint here would actually be helpful in housing, versus, including buying and renting. So there are a number of different opportunities we have economically. So I don't want all of us to go out there and buy into the drama or the brainwashing that no, we all need the military. Hawaii has over-proportion of military representation. That over-proportion of military representation makes us a target. Doesn't make us safe. Makes us a target. So I think this is a small opportunity that we should all get in on. Whether you don't have to not believe in the military, you don't have to be anti-military. This is just good economic sense. Okay, let's support this downsizing. Mahalo.
Aloha.
I'm Pauline, Pilialoha, and as was said earlier, I'm a veterinarian. I own a practice of Ilima. And also said about 50% of my clientele are military.
No. Let's stay in the front door. No skate. Talking to the mic.
Is it better now? Okay. All right. So
Pauline, Pilialoha, yeah. I want to practice in Mililani with about 50% of my clientele are military. I have to say that although I have very good clients as military personnel, very responsible owners, they as a group are responsible primarily for the amount of abandoned animals on base. There's a huge overpopulation of cats there, and this is a significant problem. It's a health concern for everyone. It's an economic concern. The shelters here are overflowing because of these abandoned pets. They often are killed, or nicely said, euthanized, because they cannot hold them or provide for them. And I think this is significant. I'll get my soapbox a little bit. We talk about Hawai'i and we care for the land, but you cannot have dirt that you care for. You're caring for the plants, you're caring for the water resources, you've got to care for the animals too. That's part of your Hawai'i. Just as it is in the ocean, you're not just caring for the water or the reef, you're caring for the creatures there. So it's important to remember that our responsibility extends to the land animals and the animals who fly over us too. So it is a significant concern and responsibility for all of us. The thing I was going to say is, I recently went to a meeting last week at Mililani High School. It was a community meeting that the Mililani congresspersons, honestly I can't remember their names, I don't live in Mililani, but it was a very nice woman and a very nice young man. But the congressperson male had sent in a little packet to all of us attending the meeting some flyers on a topic called Keep Hawaii's Heroes. It is a campaign to encourage the people in the community to write to their congresspersons to tell them they don't want the bases to be shut down. He stressed, which I find kind of interesting, this little box here. You can go to keephawaisheroes.org just to get yourself informed. They have a little box here that talks about all the things that the military, the Army specifically impacts here. Everything was negative. Air quality, water resources, airspace, facilities, culture resources, noise, energy demand and generation, soils, land use conflict and compatibility, biological resources, hazardous material, hazardous waste, wetlands, traffic and transportation. The only thing that they highlighted that they considered positive was the social economic impact, which you had heard Manu go into detail about. What I also find interesting is she had mentioned that there's about $16 million of that supposed $1.35 billion that is supposed to benefit our community. This actually says it's only $9.2 million, so even less than what our friends has put out. This is so the point being, it's not very beneficial. And social economic, I would do better as a business to have a stable local community, long-term committed, not moving, not dependent upon PCSing, not abandoning their pets, So even though this would affect me initially, I believe in the long run this is not only better for my own personal business, but for all of our businesses, that we foster and grow our local communities. Lastly, on this particular issue with the Keep Hawaii's Heroes.org fact sheet, the local congressperson from Mililani had said that of these bases that Manu talked about across the continental U.S. that are being reviewed for closure includes Fort Polk, Louisiana, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Fort Benning, Georgia. People in those communities have actually written letters to their congresspersons and to the Army, who is responsible for making these decisions, saying we don't want you to close our base. He pointed out that Fort Benning's community sent out 11,000 letters, Fort Jackson's community 11,000 letters, Fort Polk's community 17,000 letters, and out of Hawaii only 30 letters have been received that support the military state. He spent a good amount of time at that meeting encouraging all of us to write letters and to sign their petition, which is available through their website, to let the congresspeople know that we don't want the bases to be shut down. I say we write letters to tell them how we need to shut. If we got only 30 letters to compete with this, I think sometimes it can get wordy, especially about all the benefits Manu was talking about, when it comes to economic issues, the things Ilima was mentioning and Uncle Joe was mentioning. Maybe, I didn't have a chance to worn one or Ke'aomoku yet, but maybe we could get a similar type of letter as they did for the DOI to make it kind of easy to just sign your name and send it out, and we could get those letters pushed through faster and show support. And lastly, they mentioned attend the listening sessions. Also, this congressperson encouraged everyone to attend January 27th, and they actually have on this website to sign up to attend. So I'm not sure if that's a requirement, but it should be looked into. At least go to the website and check it out, and go there. And then we don't need to be so negative, as she said, about saying I hate the military, but to just point out and stand upon the benefits of having the military leave our community. So. As a concerned business owner and Kanakamau, I encourage that we all write letters to tell them to please go nicely. Mom.
Actually, before we get to the question and answer session, we have a little bit more time. Is there something else perhaps that we didn't allow you to speak about that you might want to talk about before we go to question and answer?
No, I think I just ran through it in time, but I have a question, so can I have a comment?
Never miss an opportunity to this, share some wisdom. I think that you recall I mentioned about history. I'm going to tell you a little story, and I hope you take it home and make it a part of your history. I was in a place called Fort Kamehameha on December 7th, 1941. I was a little boy. There were 7 of us in a car. My father was stationed at Fort Kamehameha. In order to get out of that place during the bomb falling, my mother had to drop my father off and drive us on this old Packard. Anybody remember what a Packard is? It's an old car. Maximum speed 35 miles an hour. Well, it was at maximum speed that we were leaving Fort Kamehameha. We had to evacuate ourselves through Hitler during the bombing. So I was the oldest in the family. And we made it up to our tutu's house at David Track. A lot of people don't even know where that place is. We got to David Track, tutu house was empty. The whole David Track was evacuated. So we did not know where to go, so we ended up going over to Maui, over the Pauline. And that's where we stayed for 2 months. Think about the picture, people. Think about it. 1941, no cell phone, right? No telephones at that time, very little. My father is in Fort Kamehameha. He was told that we were going to Tutu's house in David Track. We got to David Track, nobody there, so we went to our friends over in Maui. For 2 months, my father did not know where we were. When he finally came out to David Track, asked Tutu, where's my family? They didn't know that we were supposed to be with them. So you see the picture. There was tension. We did not know if my father was still alive. He did not know if we made it out. No communication. I tell this story because prior to that day of infamy, there was a massive buildup in Hawaii. Massive. That invited the attack by airplane on the military. I remind all of you that the attack was on the United States forces, not the Hawaiian people. Fast forward to today. Today, there is a massive, more massive, extreme massive buildup in Hawaii. Many people don't even pay attention to it. And folks, it's not going to be carriers with airplanes coming to bomb. It's going to be missiles. And I don't think we're going to stop all of them. So when I talk about history, you are living the history that may be before the next December 7th. Think about it. I don't want to go through that again. I don't think any future Hawaiian generation would want to do that. So let's pay attention. This is an opportunity for us to relook and be Hawaiians true to our blood and be neutral instead of supporting a war-fighting machine such as the United States. Be neutral, what we were when we were overthrown. Let us not let this history that is on us, that we're living in today, to happen again for the sake of our future generations. Thank you.
Usually that's where we should end it right there. But we have some questions, and can you hear me okay? The audience did write some questions. But before I get to those questions, I just wanted to remind you, Colonel Frenzel actually did pass out an article that he prepared and was printed in this Sunday's Past newspaper. It actually provides a good account of why downsizing is actually good for the Army as well. He talks about the fact that the Army here is not prepared for military, actually they're not militarily prepared. And in fact, they can be better prepared if they were to be transferred somewhere else but Oahu. And the ability to deploy is deficient here from a military standpoint. So actually, this kind of downsizing might actually be beneficial. In fact, Colonel Frenzel would submit that it is beneficial for the military itself. So just to give you that bit of information, so I think Colonel Frenzel was passing this out. I might suggest that you read it. Also, this past Monday, we did a taping with 3 guests on Olelo Television, thanks to Scotty Wong back there. And we did one with Hanale Hoffy, and Hanale talked about Army downsizing from the cultural perspective. We did also a taping with Kyle Kachihiro, and he spoke about it from the military, demilitarizing Oahu. And then again, we spoke with Uncle Joe to provide that same experience. We just got the taping back from Scotty. I think it's actually going out already on the live streams on video. And we're going to present that. I'm going to give Colonel Frenzel an opportunity to put that on his website as well. So if you wish to review those, see those tapings, 30-minute segments, please again go to www.oc4ad.com to review that. Okay, so I'm going to start reading the questions, and I think I have 9 questions, and some of them that are related. So if that's okay, because they're all valuable, I'm going to read all the questions so that you hear what the questions were, and then we're going to get to some of them, because we may not get to all of them. So I'll go ahead and read the questions first. One of the first questions was, what about the owners of the land? Royal Patent, Konahikis, etc. That's one of the first questions. Another question is, where are the original Mahele maps with LCA allodial title numbers? Why are you not giving the lands back to the LCA owners, the lineal descendants? Another question, what provision is being made for the lineal descendant with allodial LCA royal patent? So similar question. Another question, when the military move out and the Hawaiians move in, next question, what about Halava? 10 fuel tanks, 2 leaking, water table, contaminated. So that's as I read it. Next question, if the Army leaves Oahu, is it possible that many will just be stationed on Puakaloa, therefore just perpetuating the seek, destroy, then leave unusable lands? The Navy recently sold land near the airport. Is this correct? Does the military own the land that they occupy? I'm sorry, does the government, did the government, excuse me, pay for the land? Who gets the money? Terry Kikoholani and Kyle Kazihiro have pointed out a trend with the military where instead of transferring unused military lands back to the community, they're developing real estate to hold on to the land. Is this something we should watch out for and be prepared for? And last question, and it's somewhat of a similar question. What will happen if they only cut the 16,000 people and as a result do not completely close the bases, but rather continue to have bases open with only staffs of 2,000 to 3,000 people? How will the military maintain these bases and how will they impact the local community? So those were the questions that were asked in the paper. And what I'll do is I'll just pick one and I'll start one and then I'll give to Manu to answer, or anyone else who wishes to answer. And that is the one about, where is it? The Navy recently sold land near the airport. Is this correct? Does the military own the land that they occupy? Did the government pay for the land? Who gets the money? I'd like to start with them, or anyone else can join in.
I only know a little bit about this because I just heard that there was a small little, was that from you, Antiquary? In the law that Senator Inouye put in with regards to Hawai'i lands, something in the law that says, yes, military can own the land. I haven't done any of the research on that, but I thought it was appalling, especially considering our history, that most military land is crown and government lands. And so I have heard that that is a possibility, and the military has participated in selling our lands at a profit for their own gain, rather than giving it back to the community. I've heard that. I haven't done the homework. Do you know? Does anybody in the audience happen to know? Yes, a couple people.
Back in 1988, they tried to sell Fort Rusi. At that time, it was Anderson was the mayor, and he fought it tooth and nail. He was not able to sell it. But at that time, the military said that they paid $280,000 for Fort Rusi. They told Anderson at that time that they had title. Right now, today, we still don't know who has title of Fort Rusi. Hence, you have all these homeless people sleeping in Fort Rusi. Nobody getting arrested. Not from the federal, not from the city, and not from the state. So we should be aware of that and use that same example for Mauna Kea.
Well, thank you for that. I don't want to continue unless you do know the answer to that because we have so many questions. Aimoku, do you know?
The military, that the housing that used to be at Pilialoha, I actually know the guy who actually was part of the deal where they actually sold all those apartments at Pilialoha at Iroquois Point to 3 football players. And they opened one corporation. So the military claimed they own the land, they sold all that housing to these private owners, and they now collect all the rents for those properties. And I actually know the guy who was in charge of that. I can confirm that.
Mahalo. So it was you in class after that you had mentioned this, that there was this exceptional rule, which we as a people need to be educated about, and we need to push to have that outlawed, because it is just, it's outrageous. I can't even say the words I want to say.
You were part of the draft for the Pilialoha turnover. Number one, all that land was not purchased. It was done by executive order. The president took all those lands. Nothing was paid. Okay, first thing. With the BRAC changeover, talk about lying. Be prepared for a lot of crap to go through because they lied. We videotaped everything and they lied through the whole process. So unless you start now, getting the kuleana together and preparing for all the lies that are going to come up to you, you're not prepared. So you really, this is very good. I commend everybody for doing this. Mahalo. But it is time to get an entity together to prepare for all of this. Let's go, Tuzzle. Uncle Joe.
You know, before I share this, I gotta say this. Who knows where Kapua is? Who knows the first bomb run that was closed down by the people? It was back in the 60s, the late 60s. There were 4 people, George Hatawa, his wife Possum, myself, and Earl Perry, that went into the Kapua lands where the macadamia nut orchards are in Kona, just south of Milolii, and we closed down the target, naval target. But right here in my iPad, it tells me that ever since that, the Navy was supposed to have cleaned up the area, and since the late 90s and into the late 60s and into the 70s, there is still live ordnance in Kapua. So what makes us think that they will leave and still clean up? They're not even finished with Kaolave. They're not even finished with Makua. We gotta put them to the test. The first thing they gotta do is clean up. The second is pay the back rent. The third is pay the penalties for late payment, and then go home. We don't need them. It brings us the target. And in 41, that's what Uncle Joe was saying, that we were the target. Maybe it was the military. The most militaristic state in the Union is Hawaii. We have every branch of the military in Hawaii. If America is the home of the brave, the land of the free and the home of the brave, why are we sending our young men and women to become killers in the foreign land?
There was a kidnapping.
Yeah. No argument, Uncle Joe. We agree with you. Let me address the next question, and I will try to address it, and that's regarding the owners of the land. Yeah. Again, and I apologize because this is an important question that needs to be answered, but it wasn't really the function of this panel tonight to answer that question. That's why I said the context was in the fact that the Army itself was proposing the downsizing, and how can we facilitate and support that downsizing. And then after the Army downsizing, then let's deal with what's left over. An important bit of information that we must realize is that, and I think it was in one of the questions, if we do not achieve that 19,800 downsizing of the Army, especially the 16,000 in Fort Shafter, there is, Schofield Barracks, there is the possibility, as one question mentions, that they will find some other utilization for that base. So we need to achieve that number. We need to support the total downsizing of the 19,800 that they're proposing, so that when that downsizing occurs, then it opens up the question, what do we then do with the land? And then we can address the question about having it returned to the rightful owner, whether it's LCA, and of course you know where I stand, whether it's the Hawaiian Kingdom, but those are the questions that we address after we first support the fact that Army should be getting out of that area to begin with, the total numbers. So I'm sorry we're not prepared to essentially answer this question tonight, but that's where we wanted to set this up, to start this out, to encourage other people to have these discussions and perhaps look at it from that context, where the land goes to. We can have another discussion like that, another panel, but that's how I would address it tonight. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to address it right now. Yes?
The LCA.
The LCA, or whether it's, you want to address it?
Well, I guess just to kind of comment on all of these questions, and getting a better sense of the temperature of the audience here, is that what we have an opportunity here is to be proactive, right? And so this idea of the local redevelopment authorities, okay, you know, on their terms they probably have all kinds of weird ways of defining that, but I like that idea, local redevelopment authorities. Who's the authority? We are the authority, right? So got to be on our terms. So a part of that might be doing the LCA research, doing the Kuleana title research, right? Doing the land research from that point of view. We also, there's an opportunity here. I think this is kind of one of the angles of the panel tonight, is that there's many ways to reach out to a much broader audience with this downsizing. One of the opportunities is because it's being initiated by the Army. However, those who've been involved in, de-mill movement for a long time know that, like you said, Uncle Joe, they're not just gonna be like, okay, here, oh, not clean enough, okay, we'll take it back, clean it, okay, here now it's clean. We still have to organize and be prepared to struggle big time, right? To get these lands back as much as we want them, as much as we can get them, and in a condition that we find acceptable. So we still have to be prepared to organize and struggle, but we can organize perhaps with this one a little bit more broadly than we're usually able to do. But the opportunity is there to become proactive, do all the research, hit all of the angles, get together, and be prepared, not necessarily just for an easy, benevolent handover of these lands, right? So I guess that was just my way of sort of responding overall.
One of the mana'os that I see that I think are really important, and it's a common theme, is the fear that they're going to do this and kind of do a little bit, but not enough, and keep the land and then utilize it in the way they want. We need to be maka'ala to that, and we need to demand that they don't do that. The fact that we almost got Bellows back, but really, that fell through. We didn't get Bellows back. All of a sudden the Marines said, oh, we still need it. And all of a sudden the Air Force said, we still need a rest place. We did not organize well to say, hey, you guys don't need that chronic government lands, and we want it back. So here's another opportunity, and it does mean organizing, it does mean a lot of work, it does mean commitment, but it doesn't mean just us four over here, or those of you in the audience who I see all the time, who I know fight for these things. It means everybody. It means your mo'opuna, it means your keiki, it means your aunties and uncles. All of our community have to come out and in a loud, single voice say, we want it back. You can't take it. You cannot profit off of this land. We want it back, and we're going to use it for the community. And don't ask me, oh, well, who's going to get it? Oh, we don't want the Hawaiians to get it. Oh, we don't want only these guys to get it. You know what? That's later. Let's get the land back, okay? And then we'll have that discussion. Because I'm not going to argue with what we're going to do with it. Because if I tell you what I want to do with it and you don't agree, then you're not even going to fight to get the land back. That's plan B. So right now it's let's work and let's hold the Army to their objective. They want to downsize. Woohoo! Right here. Okay, even more than those two basics.
I think Terry had a comment.
My only comment had to do with Mokapu. The Canadian Marine Corps Air Station is similar, where the Marines claim fee title. But if you look at how they gained the land, it was through condemnation, and a large portion of the land at Mokapu are Crown and ceded lands, national lands. So when it comes to title, those that get onto that, you have to really be really sharp and do some pretty good research to counter, what it is that you're going to claim to have.
Thank you. Yes.
For any of you who want to see, I brought my book that has all the allodial titles for Watua area that you're welcome to look at. What I didn't find was when I was looking for the maps on Amakonakiki and also on the survey maps, registered maps that you can look at for the map room that's part of the general accounting. I believe it was map 1258, registered map 1258. There was only one for Wahiawa. The names that were written on there with the LCAs were different than what was listed in the by Apupua'a in the registered indexes. So what I found was on the maps I had family members, and here we had some family members, but I couldn't find a map that was the current maps today that I could lay on to the old maps so we could see where all these lands actually line up. I'm thinking that if we can do that, then the lineal heirs can go make their claims, can go register their claims, and they can step forward and say, these are our lands, we want them back, and you can charge back rent, whatever, but you also have infrastructure that's now something that can help build community for all of us. So, but it's one way, and you're all welcome to look at this.
Yes.
I want to thank you about the maps. Our family is trying to search for these maps. We have 40 complaints from Mahele to Kili Kanakaole and Kanakaoles because of our bloodline. Kili Kanakaole has 7 claims here. The maps are all messed up. I'm confused, but I'm not going to give up because those lands belong to the family and belong to everyone. They belong to Hawai'i to get back on the land as a start. And with this process, we can do it. So thank you very much.
Yes, that's all.
The military, they run in our face on the bottom of the windshield on the left driver's side, military stickers. I would like to see heavy Hawai'i with this flag on the left bottom of the windshield, the sticker, to put it back into their face, upside down. Please, find the sticker, put it in your windshield.
Thank you. If I may, I'll take one more comment and then I'm gonna ask a question from
Aloha, my name is Glenn from the Evamoku. And at this point in time, I want to consider the process, the procedures in how we're gonna organize, because based on the BRAC, the base realignment and closure of Roberts Point, now Kalaeloa, I think we haven't experienced how the process moved along. And if we don't have a entity in place, then we're going to be overlooked by 1, the federal government, 2, by the state, and 3, by the county. So everybody as a player, be in that mix. So we got to form this entity and not wait until the word is given, because once the military says we're going to be out by, January 21st, they're out. So there got to be a pre-negotiation before the final deadline. So the entity has to be in place, because we got to come up front and say, look, we the ones that will be in the mix, we'll be heading this process. And we cannot let other entities take over. If we do, we're going to find the same thing with Kalaeloa. We're going to find HCD in there. We're going to find HUD. We're going to find all these developers in there. And we won't be able to do anything. So number 1, the lead entity amongst this group or a broader group to be in place, so we can deal with those other entities. So next day experience, we found out in Kalaeloa, and now they have expanded. We belong to the Kalahili cultural hui in there, in the whole Ewa Plains, but we constantly being ignored. There's so many entities that want to be players that we constantly jumping over hoops. So my advice, based on the experience of Kalaeloa, Roberts Point, we got to have an entity right now in place that can be the lead with all these other government agencies. Thank you.
Colonel President, if you might, would you have any comments you'd like to add to this, since that we've got a lot of that information regarding Army Downsizing from you?
Thank you.
Listen, you know what?
No, let Joe go. Go.
You know what, Dixon? Don't wait for them to clean up. Because right here, in my iPad, it shows that back in the 60s, until today, they never clean up. Just go home. Don't worry, we take care. We take care. our taro farmers on the island of Kauai are planting on contaminated soil. And I was overwhelmed when they told me that. And I told them, you continue to plant, you continue to take that poison out, before you know it, you're going to heal the land and you're going to have a full-on harvest of good taro. And that's what we got to do. We cannot wait for them. Because if we're going to wait for them, we're going to die waiting. We got to go do them ourselves. Just go home.
Aloha. I want to address two things. One is the turnover, if it occurs, as we hope it will. We're not going to let the state screw up the turnover like it did for Barbers Point, okay? That's a solemn promise I make to you all, that I will participate in that process to whatever extent I can, so that we can follow a model like was done in Fort Ord, California, where the community cried and begged the Army not to leave because they were so scared about losing the economic benefit. But when actually it occurred, the community of Monterey has done extremely well. They've blossomed into a commercial enterprise that's based on a permanent residence. But the one key thing is they had a transition authority of politicians and local community leaders and community members that to this day still meets and goes through the process. They've had a 20-year commitment for the turnover of Fort Ord because of the value involved and the importance. Obviously, some items got turned over right away, but some they still cleaning up to this day. The key that Fort Ord community, the Monterey Bay community, and you can go online and Google Fort Ord Transition Authority, and you can see the members of their community that are part of the organization. You can see the amount of effort they did to do it right. The state did Barbers Point wrong. Is anyone in charge of that transition to this date? If you want to really look at it, HCDA is responsible, and so is the contractor, Hunt Corporation.
The whole system is wrong.
Yeah, but
Are you done? Can I comment on what you just said?
Absolutely. But I'm not.
That was not the case in Pilialoha. When BRAC got in, the federal government got into their process, they appointed one guy. They appointed one man. He wasn't a Kanaka. And he's the one that facilitated everything what government's intentions were. And to this day, people that sat in there bought whatever the guy said.
Yeah, right.
That's why you see Pilialoha is that way now. Hawaii's Pilialoha, as we come to know, is culturally sensitive, number one. Number two, the TCPs in there, the cultural, traditional cultural properties, ukus, all over. Clarks, Heiaus, Kauhales, all in there. And you know what the state appointed to run the place, HCPDA? They got Hunt in there, Hunt Corporation. They're bulldozing everything now. So what are you saying is that other places don't have cultural entities. They don't have TCPs, we do. And what you're saying is not true at all. We're different from mainland lands. We own these properties. We own everything that we own.
What part did I say it's not true?
Wait, hold on a second. Let's not get into
Okay.
Essentially, what he's doing is giving you another opinion of things we should take into consideration.
That's the same thing that happened.
I
understand that. They send a guy, they can talk shop, they can say, look, people, we're going to close the base. What we're going to do, we're going to offer the land to any entity, whether plus the state, the city, developers, anybody. The state refused. The county refused. Developers came in there. Boom. They did HCDA, the legislature. Now they're in there.
Well, that's the purpose of, that was one of the purposes of tonight's discussion, so that we are, and
That's the point I want to make.
so that we are.
We gotta be in that position.
I
501c3, we gotta be in that position where we can say, we're gonna barter with you. You're not gonna barter with anybody else. We're gonna take the lead on this.
I may have misstated, but I'm in total agreement with everything you said. Okay, I'm in total agreement with everything you said. The point I'm trying to make is the model that we use for the transition of Schofield Barracks and Wheeler Army Airfield should be much different than it was for Barbers Point. Okay, can I go to the next subject? The next subject is the real important part. We can't get wrapped up right now in the transition or the turnover or who's going to get what or who benefits. Let's worry. I like that discussion on that because it whets people's appetite and groups can look at it and talk about it and say, we could gain a huge advantage. I like to see that talk. But for purposes of the effort to win in the downsizing of the Army on Oahu, we got to focus on just the downsizing. Why is it good for the Army to downsize? Not who benefits, et cetera, but why is it good? It's good for the Army, it's good for the nation, it's good for the state of Hawaii. We need to focus on that now because this decision is going to be made within the next year. Then we have 4 years to argue with the federal government as they do downsize how it's going to happen. But that's part B. Let's focus on part A right now, which is community awareness, getting together people to agree with the downsizing.
Thank you, Al.
Okay.
Actually, we're going to run short on time for this evening. We're supposed to conclude at 8 o'clock. I'd like to think that the purpose of the presentation actually was achieved tonight, which is we've had a lot of discussion about things we need to be prepared for. And there's more discussion to be had. There's much that hasn't been discussed tonight that I think we need to have discussions about. If you know me, you know that I am an advocate for the return of the Kingdom of Hawaii. So we hadn't had that discussion tonight, and it wasn't meant to have the discussion tonight. It really was meant to have the discussion about this is the Army's plan anyway. Let's capitalize on it. Why it's good for both the Army and why it's good for us. So I think that's what we need to stay focused on for tonight. But then we need to have those other discussions as well. And there may be other panels that people may need to present to have those other discussions. The owners of the land, actually the return of the government, those kinds of things are important discussions. But this was just kind of the starting point for that. If I may, I'm going to close, but let me close. Sorry, I'm going to close with the kupuna on this. So, Auntie Terry.
I have to say this. Something that's interesting is that I was talking to Dr. Patterson, Khalil Patterson, and the thing that was interesting was that he had mentioned that during the time when Makua, we wanted to stop the bombing there in Makua, and the way they handled it was to go to Punch Bowl with a whole bunch of flowers and honored their dead in Punch Bowl. And to use it as an example, now here, this is the way we do it culturally here in Hawaii. Do you blow up other people's burial sites? I mean, do you continue to desecrate and disrespect? And I thought that was such an interesting way of doing it, but then it's like, here we go again being the nice guy, and there Mr. Franzel again is encouraging us to be the nice or American guy. Yeah, but that is the problem. We've always been on the good side, and do they ever see it? But they did stop it. They did stop it. So that was very interesting. I thought that was very nice. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Uncle Soy, you did have a comment.
Thank you. My name is Pauline. I wanted to expand on what the gentleman
Can we quiet? I can't hear.
Silence!
Yes, sir.
Hey, that's not appropriate here. Okay, this is a level man, so that's not appropriate here. I'm sorry, I'm the hostess here. Okay, so they tell them I'm sorry if anyone was offended. Okay, mahalo.
Thank you. expand on what the gentleman was saying in regards to the cost. And yeah, there is a lot of cost. There's also a lot of injury, a lot of wrong that has been done to our people, our nation, our island, our personal understanding of what occurred here in our islands. But what I want to say is that for us to consider in this agreement that we're going to compromise with the federal government and the military, that we should include some kind of we should verbalize some kind of an apology along with this agreement. When we get out there, verbalize it in a way where it can include not derogatory words, but complimentary words. And if you gotta go, go. But when you leave, make an apology. Yeah? And that, I think, will help us individually, and it'll help us as a starter for our nation, and also will help cure some of our wrongs and our problems we have with our land and stuff. That's all I got to say. Thank you. Thank you.
My last word is
I just wanted to mention that the Army said that on January 27th that there would be a hearing. They said one hearing. They said one hearing in Halikoa. That's not acceptable. Yeah, they should be having many hearings out in the community, not in Waikiki at their Halikoa. Yeah, so I just for discussion, we might consider that as we get closer to the date.
And I totally agree with you, Uncle. The journey to success is alamihi. What is alamihi? The road to forgiveness, the pathway to forgiveness. Not reach up, pull down, but reach down and pull up.
Not bring the past with you.
That's it. Alamihi. We have to start with forgiveness. And after that, everything will fall into line. The road to success is alamihi, the pathway of forgiveness. Thank you.
Down, bring up. Wow. Thank you everybody for attending tonight. Please drive safely home. And again, if you wish, the petitions are there to sign, or you can either sign the paper petition, or please go online and sign that petition to support Army Downsizing. Thank you. Good evening.